Hey guys, Jay here, and this is my team thoughts going into Saudi Arabia. Let's get into it. So first of all, a quick recap in regards to Bahrain. Can't complain, all three of my teams went up in the rankings, with my team 3 still the best out of the 3, although my team 2 did climb the highest. They climbed a couple of 100,000, I believe. So happy with my result. In terms of the scores, for team 1, I took a -10 for free transfers. I brought in Piastri, Hadjar and Doohan. Piastri coming away with 90 points, a solid 25 for first in the race, 10 for pole position in qualifying, and 10 for fastest lap. Oliver Bearman, obviously the standout though, starting in 20th, finishing in 10th, 10 positions gained, 11 overtakes. And poor Jack Doohan was just a point short of the 0.6 million increase after the Hulkenberg disqualification, which we'll get into later. For Team 2, I got 278 points. Antonelli came away with 14 points. He got 7 points for qualifying. He lost 6 positions, but he did get 13 overtakes, so not too bad. But thankfully, I had Piastri in the team as well for those 90 points. And then finally, my team 3, which is currently my best team, although it did score the least amount of points this weekend, with Lando Norris as my 2 times DRS, finishing in 3rd, 15 points, qualifying 6th with 5 points, 3 positions gained, so 3 points and 9 overtakes. So where does this leave me in terms of my team selection going into Saudi Arabia? Well, first of all, we've got to also take into consideration Miami, because the current plan is to play Limitless in Miami. So we need our, quote, budget team for Saudi to go into Miami, so that when we get to Imola, we restructure our team for maximising on points. There is no denying that the McLaren Mercedes Piastri meta build, as it's being known, is very powerful right now. That being said, I may have found a possible alternative. Before we get into my selections, just 2 things to note. In the F1 Fantasy Tools budget builder, I'm using the required points data, and you can see under the drivers, there's not a lot of options in terms of budget building. Your best bets for budget building, in Tier A, we've got Oscar Piastri. He needs 16 points for a 0.3 increase, or a -5 for a 0.1. Otherwise, you're looking at Russell. He needs 31 points for a 0.3, which he did score in Bahrain. Antonelli needs 34 points for a 0.3, which I don't think is going to happen. And Norris, all the way at the bottom, needs 49 points for a 0.3, but only 22 points for a 0.1, which is doable for Norris. With the B tier drivers, it's more concerning because these are our budget builders. Honestly, the only 2 that are more or less guaranteed a 0.6 is Bearman and Hadjar. Bearman needs 3 points for a 0.6 or a -4 for a 0.2. Hadjar needs 6 points for a 0.6 or 1 point for a 0.2. Doohan unfortunately now falls off the wayside for me. He needs 13 points for a 0.6 or 8 points for a 0.2. As good as he did in Bahrain, I don't think it's going to happen in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is going to be harder for overtaking for a start. The other one is Esteban Ocon. He's actually fallen now because of how well he's been doing. He is now at that point where he's starting to become too expensive for what you're going to get for him. So he's currently valued at 9.3 million because of all his increases, which has helped us build our budgets. But now he needs 18 points for a 0.6, 10 points for a 0.2. If this was Miami, I'd be okay with Ocon because I think he could get 10 points in Miami. But with Saudi Arabia, overtaking is going to be harder unless he gets I would say, a top 10 qualifying position and then somehow gains positions and get some overtakes. Then he may get the 0.2. But I do think Ocon is where we could lose a little budget this week. However, if my theory is correct, if we lose that budget with Ocon, I'm hoping we'll then regain that budget in Miami, because then his threshold won't be as high. At least that's, if I've understood it correctly, that's my thinking. Otherwise, honestly, your best option is Bortoleto, because he's not going to drop in price. He's not going to increase unless by some miracle he gets 15 points or for a 0.6 or 11 points for a 0.2. But Bortoleto is now definitely a budget safe option. I wasn't overly keen for Bahrain because I felt there was still more room for budget growth. But now Bortoleto, I think, needs to be in my teams to protect my budget. With the constructors, it's a different story. They are all guaranteed to increase maximum price, except for maybe Williams, who need 21 points for a 0.6, and definitely Kick Sauber. Kick Sauber is a no-go, but otherwise Williams is a risk. But any other of the constructors, in terms of budget growth, you're laughing. Does this mean you should go to 2 budget constructors? Originally, I thought about this going into Miami for Team 2, I think it was. But I've changed my mind because we're just going to be losing out too many points, especially with the McLaren Mercedes meta build. So in terms of the team calculator, just something to note. I used to use the equal PPM simulation for my Team Thoughts videos, but I'm now using the weighted average simulation for my Team Thoughts videos because we now have 4 races that have passed. So we now have a kind of a better understanding of how much the previous races will affect the assets moving forward over that 3 race average. And so on the left hand side, where you'll be able to see the team that I've entered, this team, for example, this is the meta build with Bortoleto along with McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri. It's simulated to gain 1.5, which is the maximum budget increase for this team. So for example, McLaren is 0.3, Mercedes 0.3, so that's 0.6. Piastri is 0.3, so that's 0.9. Delermain is 0.6, so that's 1.5. Ocon is due as 0.2, so that's 1.7. HAAS is due to decrease by 0.2, so that's 1.5. And you're not going to lose any budget with Bortoleto, so it stays at 1.5. And the same for the points. It's what the maximum points gain could be. So I'm now using the weighted simulation on F1 Fantasy Tools Team Calculator. So, talking of the meta build and the calculator, I have got 4 possible team ideas in mind. The first one is, of course, the meta build, which is McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri as your ×2, Ocon, Delermain, HAAS, Bortoleto. This will cost you 105.3 million. The estimated price change is 1.5 million. But the estimated points is 225.8. The second option I have for you is, rather than Mercedes, we have George Russell. So this is McLaren, HAAS, Piastri as your ×2, Russell, Delermain, HAAS, Bortoleto. This costs 103.5 million, so it's slightly cheaper. Estimated price change is 1.7, so there's a 0.2 extra gain, which isn't a lot, but it's still a gain. However, estimated points is a lot less, 208.2. The third option I've got for you is McLaren, HAAS, Piastri, Antonelli, Delermain, HAAS, Bortoleto. This comes in at 101.2 million, again with a 1.7 estimated price increase with 205.4 points. So those are your 3 obvious choices depending on your budget. But I think I may have found an alternative, which is an Albon Norris alternative. So an Albon Norris build, which is McLaren, HAAS, Norris as your ×2. So if you don't want to go with Piastri, Norris is an option for this build. Albon, Ocon, Delermain, HAAS. This will cost you 105.7 with a 1.8 price change estimate increase, but 224.3 points estimate, which is only just over a point less than the meta. And it comes with a 0.3 extra price increase. But it does come with a risk because, again, overtakes are going to be hard in Saudi Arabia. So it depends. It's really going to depend on Albon, how he does. I don't think Norris is a concern. It's going to come down to Albon. And then finally, if you're a bit richer than me, you could even go McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri as your × 2, Albon, Ocon, Behrman, Bortoleto. This costs 108.8 million. I'm about 500 to a million short through my teams. But 108.8 million, 1.5 price increase, 227.7 points. Again, it's going to come down to Albon. So go with your gut. That being said, it could be a good gamble, and there is another alternative, which is McLaren, HAAS, Piastri as your × 2, Albon, Ocon, Behrman, HAAS. This doesn't even cost a million. It's just under at 99.1 million, and it's got an estimated price change of 2 million gain. But it only comes in at 207.3 points, so it is less points than the meta. Just sticking with Albon for a second, if we go back to the budget builder, I think that over the next race in Saudi, he will gain at least a 0.2 if he qualifies well, possibly. He needs 12 points for a 0.2. Again, as I said though, with Ocon, it will rely on positions gained and some overtakes. I don't see him getting 24 points for a 0.6. But he needs 12 points for a 0.2. Now, even if he doesn't, he only needs a point for a 0.2 loss, which I'm pretty sure he'll regain in Miami. So I think Albon is now an option, at least for the next 2 races. But it will depend on your budget and how he does in free practice and what your gut's telling you, to be honest. So what does that mean for me? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Team 1, I think it's going to be play it safe, and we are just going to go straight into the meta now. I wanted to carry on building my budget, but I think I've hit a wall with this team. I could go for the Albon alternative, but my main team is in the middle of my 3 teams, and it's the most important one. So I don't know if I want to take the risk on Albon for Team 1. And yeah, the meta is just too powerful. So unfortunately, budget building is going to be a little harder. And that is my current thought. And it may change, but right now I think for Team 1, we play safe and we go for the meta. So that's Piastri, HAAS, Ocon, Behrman, Bortoleto, McLaren, Mercedes. Now for Team 2, this is my lowest ranked team, but it has the best budget. And so I'm thinking, why don't we just try and keep increasing it? Let's see how much money we can make. So this will be a straight Antonelli for Alexander Albon. So that 2 million price increase build gamble. The other benefit with this, by only making 1 transfer, it means I'll have 3 transfers for Miami. And that gives me 2 options. I can either play Limitless in Miami, or I could just make 3 transfers in Miami and save my Limitless. Now, Team 3 is currently my best team, but it has the worst budget. That being said, it's the only team where I've really got 2 options. I could make the meta build because I've got 3 transfers. I didn't realise that I'd saved a transfer somewhere. So I could go Norris for Piastri, Doohan for Bortoleto, and then HAAS for Mercedes. So I could do that, but then that means I'll be running the meta in 2 teams, and that's kind of a bit boring. Or I could do the Norris Albon build. So Doohan for Albon. That's 1 transfer out of 3. So that means, again, I'll carry an extra transfer into Miami, meaning that, again, I've got that option of playing my Limitless in Miami, or I'll have 3 transfers for Miami. So, chips. The idea is to play Limitless in Miami because Miami is a sprint race. However, budget building has been more difficult this season. And there is a lot of talk about people using Limitless in Saudi Arabia. and I do understand the appeal. I think for me, the play is still limitless in Miami because it's a sprint race, and also because both Saudi Arabia and Miami are street tracks. So my concern with playing limitless in Saudi Arabia is DNFs. Now you could counter argue that and say, yeah, but you could get DNFs in the sprint and the Grand Prix in Miami, and that is true, which makes it a greater risk. But you'd also get more points if there is no DNFs. So right now, at the time of this recording, which is Monday, I think limitless in Miami, but I completely understand if people do it in Saudi. The only other chip would be no negative. Again, it's a street circuit. The only problem with playing your no negative early in the season is then you don't have it for tracks like Monaco or when there's bad weather like in Brazil, which we had last year. And there's a lot of people that are, a lot of teams, that are holding on to their no negative for later in the season. The other one would be Final Fix. I probably wouldn't use Final Fix just because overtaking is going to be more difficult. So, yeah, I think Final Fix is a no-go for me, even if a top asset drops. Otherwise, Wildcard, I'm not interested. Autopilot, not interested. Extra DRS, not interested. Autopilot and Extra DRS are for later in the season. And Wildcard, the plan at the moment for Wildcard is Imola, except for Team 1 because I've already used it. Okay, so in terms of timing, here in the UK, it's going to be afternoon and evening for us. So on Friday, we've got practice 1 at 2:30, practice 2 at 6 o'clock. Then on Saturday, we've got practice 3 at 2:30, qualifying and your fantasy team lock-in is at 6 o'clock on Saturday, before an evening race at 6 p.m. on Sunday. So remember, locking your teams by 6 p.m. on Saturday. That is when qualifying is here in the UK. In terms of the weather, at the time of this recording, it is telling me on Met Office that we are looking at 34 degrees at 6 o'clock Sunday night. So it will be in the evening, but it's going to be a hot evening. So bear that in mind when picking your team. So last season, one thing to obviously point out was Oliver Bearman made his debut. He drove the Ferrari in place of Carlos Sainz and finished in an impressive 7th. So I think we're all hoping that he pulls off another amazing feat in Saudi Arabia. So I imagine most of us will have him in our team. That said, your top 10 last year was Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, George Russell, Oliver Bearman, Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Hulkenberg. The things that stand out for me there are Fernando Alonso. If he finishes 5th, I think we're all going to scream. Lando Norris in 8th. I would imagine he will do better this year. But otherwise, Nico Hulkenberg 10th. That would be interesting if he does that in the Sauber. But otherwise, yeah, your usual suspects: Verstappen, Leclerc, Piastri, Russell. So for GridRivals, I decided to pay a release fee for Gabriel Bortoleto before the Bahrain Grand Prix, and I brought in Isaac Hadjar. I also brought in Oscar Piastri for Alexander Albon because Alexander Albon was out of contract, and I brought in Racing Bulls for McLaren, who were also out of contract. That said, all my assets will now be out of contract for Saudi Arabia. That's done deliberately because all my assets for Saudi Arabia will be one contract assets, so that I can go into Miami with a brand new team. So final thoughts, starting off once again with driver of the day, Lewis Hamilton, 29% of the vote, I believe. This could be a coincidence, but I actually tried to vote for Esteban Ocon. It didn't work. I then tried to vote for Oliver Bearman. It didn't work. I then refreshed for a second time, and my vote for Oliver Bearman then went through. So I don't know if anyone else had problems trying to vote, but there is obviously a lot of, shall we say, upset fantasy players over driver of the day, and rightly so, because it's an extra 10 points. It's becoming a bit of a meme, to be quite honest. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton driver of the day when Oliver Bearman went from P20 to P10. The only reason I went with Ocon over Bearman was just because he crashed in qualifying, and yet he impressed in the race by going from P14 to P8. Either one of those two should have got driver of the day, in my opinion. I feel like I'm missing someone. I feel like there's someone else that should have got driver of the day. So, again, let's have some fun. We're going to spin the wheel. Last time it was Alexander Albon. He obviously didn't win driver of the day. Who will it be in Saudi Arabia? No way. Jack Doohan. If Jack Doohan gets driver of the day, I'm going to scream. We finally have a statistics page. We had this last season. You've got your total fantasy points scored, your average fantasy points scored, valuation changes, driver selection, percentage, value for money drivers, overtakes, podiums, top 10 finishes, whoops, DNFs, fastest laps, and driver of the days. And oh, they have fixed it because I was on my phone earlier and this wasn't right. It was just saying 2, 1, 1. So it didn't have the point rises. So for example, if we go to valuation changes, for example, this will tell you all the assets that have changed in price. And if you want to know who scored the most points, you just go to your fantasy most points scored, or better yet, if you go to the average fantasy points scored, you'll get your points per million here. So for example, Lando Norris has scored 39.75 points per million at the moment. Obviously it's still early, which is why it's so high. And the same for your constructors as well. The difference is with constructors, we should have fastest pit stops. There we go. So fastest pit stop counts. So we see here Racing Bulls and Ferrari have got the fastest pit stops with 25 each. And that is it. Otherwise, it's the same as last year. Just a slight change in the graphics. So in case you missed it, George Russell got away with a penalty after the race. My understanding is that he hit the radio button, which opened the DRS, and so he quickly closed it, and he gained a 0.02 or 0.2 advantage, so he slowed down so that he lost the advantage, and that's why he didn't get the penalty after the race. And Nico Hulkenberg, unfortunately, he suffered a disqualification due to a skid block breach, so the same as what happened to, or similar to what happened to Hamilton in China. And so you can see here on Hulkenberg's F1 Fantasy card that he has a race not classified -20. So if you had Hulkenberg in your team, I'm afraid it was a -20 for him. So that's it from me, guys. So over the weekend, I don't know if there'll be a final thoughts video just because of how late the race will be for us here in the UK. So I apologise if there's not a final thoughts video. Next week will either be my Miami video or something else that I have in mind, and then Miami the week after. But most likely Miami, but we'll see. And in terms of this video, I'll hopefully have it up tonight, if not tomorrow, so Tuesday evening, at the very latest Wednesday. But I'll crack on, try and start editing now and get it up as soon as I can. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Good luck for Saudi Arabia, and I'll speak to you soon.